This is going to be your guide to the fastest Pokemon in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Quick, what's Alakazam's base speed? How does it compare to Gengar? Did you know that Rapidash is pretty fast too? Well, that's what this video is all about, so if it ends up helping you in any way, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your friends, because speed is one of, if not the most, important stat when it comes to competitive Pokemon. So let's get right into the list. The fastest Pokemon is going to be Jigglypuff from above, Electrode. So Electrode sits at the 150 base speed tier and is the only non-Mega Pokemon here. However, when we start talking about Mega Evolutions, they're going to dominate this list and we get into some pretty crazy stuff. So Mega Alakazam and Mega Aerodactyl also have a 150 base speed. So the fastest Pokemon is a speed tie between three of them, which is pretty crazy, and the interactions just kind of snowball from there. So 145 base speed is where we find Mega Beedrill. This is why things get crazy, because Mega Evolutions, you're only allowed one per battle. You can't just have Mega Alakazam, Mega Aerodactyl, Mega Beedrill, and then just the fastest Pokemon in the game for absurd amounts of damage. So Mind Games also come into play at this point. If you see that your opponent has an Alakazam on their team, and they Mega Evolve the Charizard, well, if you can preserve that Beedrill, their Alakazam is free, because that's going to be a massive, super effective Bug-type hit from a very powerful, very fast Pokemon. So you have to keep a lot of these things in mind as the game is dynamically changing around you, and you have to pay attention to these speed tiers as the game progresses. At the 140 speed tier, we find Mega Mewtwo Y. This is pretty interesting, because Mewtwo just doesn't share this with anyone, sits above all the other Pokemon in the game, so really the only other non-Mega will be the Electrode outspeeding you, and then everything else we talk about in this list is going to be outsped by the Mewtwo Y. It is a legendary Pokemon, so it is going to be restricted in a lot of formats, which means you might not have the most opportune way of using it, and even then, the Mega Beedrill, outspeed, Bug-type move. The Alakazam is also a pretty contentious Pokemon because it's just faster and has relatively comparable damage. So Mega Mewtwo Y, it's alright, and it sits in its own little space. Next up, we have the 130 speed tier. This is where things get a little wild because we have Mewtwo and Mega Mewtwo X. So the Mega Mewtwo X doesn't gain any speed, just gains stats off of that. Gengar, now jumping into a nice little competitive spot right here at the 130 speed. And that's going to be alongside Jolteon and the Aerodactyl. So these Pokemon, they're good. Some of them, like the Aerodactyl, just Mega into a higher tier. Jolteon kind of commanding its own realm. And then Gengar needs that speed boost because it starts losing out to other Pokemon without it. So before we go to 120, we have the 121 speed tier, which is only with one Pokemon, and that is the Mega Pidgeot. So it gets outsped by everything else we've talked about, which is kind of bad, but then it's in this nice little niche. You don't have to worry about speed ties with the 120s, and that gives it a little bit of a strange advantage. Now, if you use that advantage, cool things happen, and I just wanted to kind of point out, like, yep, it sits here, that's a Pokemon. At the 120 speed tier, we have Dodrio and Alakazam. So this is why the Mega Gengar is so important, because Alakazam outspeeds Gengar and then just nukes it on a Psychic, but then you can Mega the Gengar and then have the advantage over the Alakazam, but then Mega Alakazam is a possibility as well. Dodrio at the 120, it's a pretty safe place to be. As you can see, there's mostly like Megas and a few other Pokemon that can outspeed it. And it also does reasonable damage. It is a very frail Pokemon, so it does rely on that outspeed, which means, hey, we're finding balance, we're finding and understanding sweepers, so I think that's pretty cool. Also, in the 120 speed tier, we have the starter Pikachu from the Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu version. It got a massive speed buff, and that puts it here above all of the other Pokemon we're going to be talking about. So the 115 speed tier, we have Starmie, as well as Persian and Alolan Persian. So the Starmie, once again, like finding this outspeed on the Gengar, also in a really interesting spot, because yeah, the 115, it's now going to just have little bits of extra advantage while being a pretty solid sweeper. Persian is a fairly overlooked Pokemon as well, but again, it sits in this really cool place to where now it can like surprisingly just wreck things, and if you can use that to your advantage, it's going to be pretty nice. So if you're looking for a fast Pokemon, these are definitely options. Now we get into 110. And there's a lot of Pokemon in 110. We have Alolan Dodrio, we have Raichu, we have Alolan Raichu, we have Dodrio, and we have Tauros, as well as the Gengar. So, yeah, a lot of Pokemon to talk about right here. Again, Gengar, it's not in the best place. That 110 used to feel kind of crazy, but now when you compare it to all these other Pokemon, especially the Alolan Raichu, now you're like speed tying for like a Psychic versus Shadow Ball matchup that gets pretty intense. Tauros, it's just kind of a beefy Pokemon that just beats things out. And same with the Dodrio. Dodrio getting buffed recently, and now it's like, oh, hey, that's something that you have to deal with. That's a thing. So now we have Alolan Ninetales, which is kind of like the reverse of the Mega Pidgeot. That Alolan Ninetales is at a 109 speed tier. So it doesn't get the speed tie and get into some really interesting matchups with the 110 Pokemon, but it also beats out 105 and 100, which does have a lot of Pokemon in those respective tiers. So Alolan Ninetales, it brings its own little like speedy ice sweep to the equation, and that's how it's going to match up. 105. A lot of Pokemon at 105. We have Mega Pinsir. So bringing a lot of offensive stats, bringing a lot of offensive power, but not being completely dominating with it by having like a 115 or 120 speed. So it's still going to have a good amount of outspeeds against a lot of Pokemon. Scyther, Electabuzz, and Kadabra? So yeah, that's like one of the really interesting things, that Kadabra has a high amount of speed and a comparable amount of special attack. So it's like a mini Alakazam, and it's still going to be faster than almost every Pokemon in the game. And then this is where we find our boy Rapidash. So Rapidash outspeeding the 100 base speeds, and again bringing its kind of own uniqueness with a physical fire rush down potentially that it can use to its advantage. Speed tier 101, Pidgeot. So Mega Pidgeot gains a 20 and then has like its own little crazy interactions from there. If you're running the regular Pidgeot, yeah, you just kind of outspeed things just a little. That gets pretty cool. 100 speed tier, tons of Pokemon here. Zapdos is one that's really notable because, yeah, you might find that Zapdos is just kind of outspeeding or speed time with some weird stuff. Same on the Tentacruel. Like, Tentacruel, 100 speed. Tentacruel, one of the fastest Pokemon in Generation 1. Kind of crazy. Ninetales, also respectably quick. Charizard coming in at the 100. Both Charizard Y and Charizard X not getting any kind of speed modification. So it's just all the Charizard, every Charizard just going to be there at 100. Mew has 100 in every stat. So we're going to be seeing them on all these lists. And then the last Pokemon for the 100 speed tier is going to be Fearow. Not much to say about Fearow. I just did a guide on him recently, pretty much calling it the worst Pokemon in Pokemon Let's Go. But it is one of the fastest. Alright, so that's pretty much going to be it when it comes to the fastest Pokemon in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee to the 100 base speed tier. Now, if you want to understand all of the Pokemon speed and all of the Pokemon speed tiers, since it is really important at all levels of the game, then what you can do is go on to Pokemon Showdown, click on New Team, and then select the format for Pokemon Let's Go. What this does is it makes it to where instead of showing all the Pokemon, it only shows the Pokemon that are viable in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, so Generation 1. Then you can go to this tab right here, click on Speed, and there we go. So that's going to give you the list right there. Also, for some reason, like, Mega Kangaskhan wasn't in my slides, so yeah, that slide just vanished for some reason, but that's another Pokemon that speed ties on the 100 base speed tier. And you might have to take into consideration that some of these Pokemon, they're not going to be running their beneficial speed nature, which is kind of what's assumed here. You know, you're going to have a timid Ninetales, you're going to have a timid Alakazam or Jolly Aerodactyl, and then there's going to be some other little nuances that you might have to pay attention to as Pokemon shift around. So it's not just straight numbers, because natures can affect the stats in a pretty interesting way. There's also some like really interesting not fully evolved Pokemon like Voltorb. I don't think anyone's ever going to use a Voltorb, but it finds 100 base speed. Same with Haunter, Diglett, Raticate being the fastest Pokemon below triple digit speed. And then we can see like a lot of interesting Pokemon. Venomoth, it wants to Quiver Dance, so it can be speed boosting. Pokemon with agility, they're going to be doubling. But one thing to note is that doubling your speed because of base stats doesn't immediately mean that you're like, doubling to a 180 base speed or something. The numbers are going to be a lot different than that. Some examples of how that ends up breaking down is because without EVs, we're not going to be able to gain stats on top of stats, so the numbers kind of get weird. If we're running a modest Venomoth, and we use a Quiver Dance, plus 1 speed, so times 1.5 our speed stat, is going to make us speed tie with 130 base speed Pokemon that are timid. Now, if we go from modest to timid, that means we're speed tying with 145 base speed Pokemon, and then you can kind of use the charts to understand what you need to beat, how it works from there, and then Venomoth going times 2 on the speed is just going to pretty much outspeed everything. We can see that also running like a modest 150 base speed Alakazam is going to make you outspeed 130 base speed Pokemon, but then you lose out to the Beedrill and other Pokemon like that. So there's also some risk that you might have to take into consideration as the opponent is going for damage. Something like the Mega Aerodactyl. They have an adamant Mega Aerodactyl to try to pressure as much pain as possible, well, they're still going to be able to outspeed your Jolteon, even though Jolteon's kind of at the fastest. And going back to the list, it shows that giving that up and running, you know, an offensive nature on some of the highest tier Pokemon means you're only losing out a couple of matchups to gain more damage against other specific matchups. And then what I was talking about with like doubling your base speed, so here we have Beedrill. base speed of 75 using agility. That doesn't double it to 150 base speed, it actually makes it a lot more. So 104 gets doubled to 208. Well, if we have something like the Timid Alakazam, that's going to be 205. So we can actually run an offensive nature and then still retain more points in our speed to outspeed the fastest Pokemon in the game. Now, this is true of a lot of other things, a lot of other matchups, and it works because that's how base stat works. The base stat doesn't start at 0, it starts at a different number, and then it scales up from there linearly, so there's always that little bit of advantage that then adds up and then doubles and then gets a little bits of points right there. That's pretty much how it works. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Talk about like your favorite interactions with speed, what you're looking forward to for like the next guides, next information and stuff like that. And that's all there is to it. So if you guys enjoy the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.